Hey guys, welcome back to Dream Analytica. My name's R, and today I'm just going to talk about an image that I drew during my descent into my own unconscious, and I want to just talk about some of the things that I experienced while down there. I think it'd be rather interesting to hear the experiences of a person who actually went into their unconscious and documented it as described by the image that I'm going to share with you on I think it's on this side of the screen. So first of all, like, what is the unconscious? The definition of the unconscious is not conscious. It is the other definition is as a noun is the part of the mind which is inaccessible to the conscious mind, but which affects behaviors and emotions. Um, so I think first of all, I should talk about like why did I go into my own unconscious. I've always been interested in studying psychology. I've always been interested in psychology, as a matter of fact. And I'm not sure if this has anything to do with my personality type or my upbringing. I'm not sure if it's a nature or nurture thing, but I've always been sort of skilled at psychology. Maybe back then I wasn't aware of the terminology, but I've always been good at reading people. I've always been good at feeling the environment. So I'm an INTP, so I naturally have extroverted intuition in my second slot, and that extroverted intuition has maybe something to do with me being able to understand psychology much more than I think I would have if it was a different function. Um, and as well as the introverted thinking. The TI is my Dom. Um, so yeah, I've always been interested in psychology, and I finally started to take it very seriously back in 2017 to around there. And yeah, and so I started studying Carl Jung, and then I just wanted to understand how to activate my unconscious aspects. And it's a very long story, and I don't think I'll get into it here, but ultimately what that meant was activating the parts of myself of the unconscious aspect. So it began with studying my personality type, um, and then understanding cognitive functions and understanding what my unconscious cognitive functions were. So, for instance, mine would be extroverted feeling as my fourth function, which there is some talk about it being the anima/animus function. Um, so I understood that I needed to understand what extroverted feeling was, um, and essentially how to use it properly, better integrate it into my life. Anyways, so going back to the drawing, I drew it. First of all, I drew it with my left hand, so I'm dominant, right hand dominant, and I understood that if I used my left hand, I would activate a different part of my brain, and ultimately that was the case. So this is actually the first drawing I've ever done with my left hand, and it's not the image is not reversed, as you can see by the pen. I just wrote mirrored because of, I think they say it's because of the ink stain thing, but I just did it because it just felt right. I don't know how to explain it. I didn't do it um, to impress anyone or anything. I just did it because it felt right. And I heard Da Vinci wrote mirrored as well. Uh, but it did ultimately activate some parts of my brain that I never knew existed before. And so my experience with it was I had no intention whatsoever with the drawing. Like I didn't have a plan of what I was going to draw. I pretty much, um, I should say that I don't really, I would consider myself an artist. So, um, so that has something to do with uh, being being good in psychology, I guess, as well. But ultimately, what I was trying to say is that there was no intention for the drawing. Uh, it essentially started from the center, if there is a center, but it started from the center, and I just started drawing line by line. And during that state, there's what people call like flow state, but for me, it was is a little different. It was like it was really like I was unconscious. I had no idea of what my hand was doing, and I just kept like I had a ton of feelings. Like something was being activated inside me that I couldn't explain properly in words. I'm just not articulate enough, but there was a lot of feelings involved and a lot of visions. Uh, I called it, I termed it deep state. Like I was in a very deep, almost meditative like state, except this meditation is not where your mind is completely empty. It's as if I was not there. Like I was detached, sort of an out of body experience where I was not in my body, and my hand was just doing as it pleases. So um, ultimately, like when the form came out, I just I was in complete. I was actually shaking. I was a little scared because I was like, what the hell is this? I like I don't draw stuff like that. I was trained as a designer, automotive designer, so all my forms are materialistic based. So this shape, this symbol, this form, whatever you want to call it, um, I'm still my voice is still shaking now because of the intensity of the experience, where I just don't know where it came from. Well, I know where it came from now, but at the time I was just in complete shock. And I showed my friends, and they were just in complete shock too because they know me, and they also know I don't draw stuff like that, let alone with my left hand. So yeah, what ultimately I was feeling in for this particular drawing. This is not the only one. I've done others, which maybe I will show if this video people find this video appealing. Um, what I was feeling at the time was very intense. It's very difficult to explain, and I understand now, like people who have a very deep connection to their creative side. You just can't put it into words, which is why I drew it. I There were just a ton of feelings, very deep feelings that, um, like, if you understand cognitive functions, like thinking is not the only dimension of cognition. That you also have sensation, intuition, and feeling. And so I had essentially unlocked these feelings that I have never felt before, or that I have felt before. I just wasn't able to identify them, not in terms of defining them, not with words, but feeling them. Like there's this whole new dimension to where you can understand yourself, and these feelings are like a spectrum. These feelings are like a spectrum of color. Like there's just um, like I think it's similar to like how do you describe the color red to a blind person or the color blue to a blind person? It's like that. It's like I can only say that they were very deep feelings, very intense. I was physically shaking at the time. Um, uh, what Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, coined the process of what I had actually gone through was called active imagination. It's when you consciously engage with your unconscious actively. and participate in the dialogue that occurs between the unconscious and conscious mind. Normally, we first of all, you can't stay in that state for too long because, like I described, of the intensity. But the way the unconscious normally communicates with the conscious mind is through dreams. So you can actually access that part of you through dream analysis or dream interpretation. But to do it actively in waking hours is like a whole different ball game. It's very intense, and yeah, and so the line between sanity and insanity, what I realized from going that deep into my unconscious is that it's very thin. I honestly don't know how I got out of that alive. Um, I'm not going to say it was a traumatic experience, but it really felt like I was going a little bit crazy. And I studied a little bit of schizophrenic patients' drawings too, and it opened up the door to me understanding that the schizophrenic patient, their unconscious is essentially, there's no barrier there. So the unconscious sort of bubbles to the surface. Um, be, if you think like consciousness and the unconscious, the ego is kind of like protected, like a little bubble or something, like a little boundary um, of consciousness, and so in schizophrenia, I feel like the at least from what I experience is like the unconscious bubbles to the surface, and so they can actually hear voices, and you, it's very similar to like dreaming while you're awake. I'm not talking about daydreaming because that's fantasy. That's something you actually have control over. You can decide what you want to daydream about. What I'm talking about here is like imagine dreaming, but you're awake, like where these things you have no control over come to the surface into your conscious awareness, um, and that's why like I feel like they can hear voices, they can see things that aren't actually there, but they are there. It's just in the unconscious coming to the surface. So that's kind of like the state I was in. It was almost a schizophrenic state, um, and it was like I said, it was so deep that I honestly don't know how on earth I got out of there. Um, and I did it alone, so that's actually not recommended. It's a little dangerous to do it alone because then you have nothing to pull you back into reality. Um, yeah, it was. Hmm. So yeah, the image itself, I wrote on the on the drawing there that it was the Eye of Osiris, and I have no connection whatsoever to Egyptology. I had never studied Egyptology and their symbols before, or the myths. I obviously know some words like Ra or Osiris, and I coined this the Eye of Osiris, and just because it felt like that, it wasn't like I saw the image and was just like, yeah, this looks like Osiris. It really felt like something inside me was like, this is the Eye of Osiris. And I didn't understand what that meant when I wrote that down until after I did a bit of digging and a bit of research on Wikipedia and Google. And I found out that Osiris was dismembered and his body parts were scattered across the world. Um, and I learned a bit about Isis as well and how she gathered his body parts. Anyways, what that ultimately told me was that I went to such a depth that I actually went beyond my personal unconscious into the collective unconscious, because there is no way that I had that in my personal unconscious. I I, I have no association, direct association to an image like this, and even as I stare at it, it's just it feels so familiar but so foreign, so alien to me, and I could stare at it all day and try to understand what it meant. But I can't describe it articulately with words. It's just a, a deep and intense feeling. And so what was really crazy too was like the image did not form until I was like on the outer edges of the drawing. Like I started from the center and then it just kind of worked its way outward, and then this sphere developed, that round shape there, and it just, I mean, it looks like the like if you took an eyeball and just flipped it, um, inverted it, like an inverted eyeball. Which, I mean, it's like looking at the eye from within, literally. And that's kind of what I did essentially. And again, it was deep state, so like I wasn't conscious of what I was drawing at the time. I was just feeling, and I think that's what a lot of exceptionally creative artists. Uh, that's the type of state they get into. Although I don't think they know that they're in that state consciously, or even the definition of that state. It's a state where something takes over you. It's like something takes over you. You become possessed almost. You are not there. Like you're not in your body. Like I remember distinctly that I was having all these visions. Um, I don't want to talk about it because of maybe in another video, but I had all these visions and a lot of deep insight and wisdom. Some of them a bit terrifying, and just all these messages. Like again, it really felt like I was in a state of psychosis, of schizophrenia, where the barrier was just the barrier of consciousness and unconsciousness was dissolved, and the unconscious was just bubbling through. Um, yeah, and I think as well the so I also wanted to add to I thought about maybe talking about this in a separate video, but maybe I could just kind of lead into it here, where psychology is not a science. I think it's more of an art. It's an art supplemented by science. What I mean by that is psychology is what I mean by that is psychology is inherently subjective. It is about the personal experience, and which means you can't quantify it. You can't predict it. You can't measure it, and therefore you can't generalize it. Every psychology is as unique as a person's fingerprint, like even more complex than that. But that's the terminology. That's the analogy I use. Um, what that ultimately means is that the experience you have over your life creates your associations to certain things, to certain symbols, objects, whatever you want to call it. Like red for one person may be different, completely different. Maybe red will have a completely different meaning for one person from a certain culture or ethnic background to another person with a different background. And that is both ingrained in the experience that that person has developed over his or her life, their life, and their own personal psychological makeup, like their personality type. Like you can have twins that are completely different, um, in terms of their personality type and their perspective and their desires and wants and needs. That's what I mean. So I think the real issue with modern psychology is that we're trying to sort of generalize through science, obviously, uh, a means of understanding psychology, when in fact, in my opinion, I think the best psychologists are actually artists because they understand the human experience rather well. Um, and I think artists have the greatest chance of integrating the unconscious into consciousness through their work, through their art, and they have a deep intuitive access to that. So, what I was talking about earlier about how psychology to me is subjective, not objective, what that ultimately means is that I think the greatest psychologists have uh, or need or require intuition and feeling because it's a subjective experience. And the intuition is for the associations of the symbols from the unconscious mind when you do dream analysis or active imagination or a symbol like the image you see here. And then you need feeling to have empathy of what the person may have felt, because that's really what dreams are about. It's about taking a symbol and using that symbol to describe a feeling. And so like this image, for example, like it's a symbol for all the feelings that I had felt, not necessarily what I saw, but what I felt. My rational thinking cannot describe it, and so I need to go into my feelings and intuition to describe it. Um, I think that's what I mean. Uh, yeah, um, I feel like I. So this is the first time I'm going. Look, I'm going off script here, and so I feel like I'm not doing justice to better describe the image. Primarily because I don't think I can in words. But I think the image itself evokes an emotional response from people that I have shown the image to, and that in itself is enough to describe the image to that person because it is from the I believe it's from the collective unconscious, which means it's from a shared um, collective unconscious uh, where we share images and symbols where we can interpret them in a collective stance, like the moon or the sun or something like that. And so I think the image itself evokes an emotional response that helps describe it without me having to articulate it. Um, yeah, and so that's yeah. So thanks so much for watching. If this video is interesting for you, I'd be more than happy to share more images of my experience. And you would be able to also see if I do decide to continue making videos about my experience into the unconscious, you'll see like a progression, an evolution of the images. They go from so this was actually maybe the fifth one that I did. So in the beginning, it started off very, I wouldn't say simple, but it started very not as abstract as this, and you can see it slowly progressing um, into more chaotic forms. And then there's one after this where I coined it the Enlightenment because of just how chaotic it was. It was like shining a light into the unconscious, and it was just complete chaos. And that image, I have a lot to talk about, or I would like to talk about that. But essentially, it went from not so abstract to very crazy abstraction, and then the final one that I did because I don't think my body could take it anymore is super clean and simple with very minimal line work. And that image I also drew with my left hand. I think I drew that with my left hand. But yeah, hope I'm happy to share my experiences with you and my descent into the unconscious. And maybe in another video too, I'll describe my reasons for wanting to study psychology to such a depth, and my reasons for taking that huge risk. But again, thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me continue my work in psychology and helping people with their dreams. And if you would like help with your dreams, you can also reach out to me at dreamanalytica.com, where you can fill out a form and, yeah, essentially reach out to me. I've also developed an app on the App Store, so if you would like to learn more about analytical psychology, it's all there. And yeah, thank you for watching.